At the beginning we are told about a hiker who went missing in 1955 and contacted a strange virus called hill fever by the local community. However, the indigenous people called it face of the wolf. The movie begins with young Blake Lovell waking up and having breakfast when his father, Grady, tells him to get ready for hunting. They head toward the forest but pause to admire the beauty of a nearby valley. Soon, they arrive at their destination, and Grady gets frustrated with Blake for being inattentive while he explains the dangers of toxic mushrooms. Grady reminds him that he is there to teach him survival skills, but they are soon distracted by a deer nearby. Grady takes aim, but the deer moves away before he can shoot. He calls for Blake, only to find that Blake has wandered off for a better look at the animal. Blake raises his rifle and suddenly spots a mysterious creature staring at him. Fear paralyzes him, and he doesn't know what to do when Grady catches up and furiously scolds him for straying away. However, Grady quickly senses danger and instructs Blake to hide in a nearby deer blind. The duo takes shelter, waiting for the creature to reveal itself so they can take it down. However, the creature is cunning and attempts an attack from behind before shifting its focus. Grady hears noises and realizes the creature has taken down a deer instead. Scanning the area, he spots it but fails to shoot in time. Later that evening, Blake overhears his father discussing the face of the wolf with his friend Dan. Grady asks Dan to help him track and eliminate the creature. Blake accidentally makes a noise, drawing his father's attention. 30 years later, Blake is seen with his daughter, Ginger, who starts balancing on traffic barrels in a busy street. He scolds her, demanding she come down, and grows even angrier when she disobeys him. Blake realizes his mistake and apologizes to Ginger, promising he never wants to be this way. That night, he enjoys spending time with her when his wife, Charlotte, returns and hands him a letter. Upon checking, he discovers that the state of Oregon has officially declared his father dead. Charlotte is occupied with a phone call when Blake asks her to take it to another room. After the call ends, she argues with him, but he then reveals his father's passing. Charlotte and Ginger feel saddened by the news, and when asked, Blake admits he regrets not knowing or speaking to his father more. The next day, Charlotte finds Blake waiting outside her office with lunch. He confesses that she and Ginger are the only family he has left, and he wants to create meaningful memories with them. He asks Charlotte to accompany him to Oregon so they can pack up his father's belongings and spend the summer there. Though hesitant at first, Charlotte eventually agrees. Blake and his family are seen happily heading toward Grady's farmhouse. Soon, Blake is forced to stop after finding his father's driveway blocked. Checking their phones, he realizes they have no signal here. Suddenly, Ginger spots a man in the nearby treehouse. The man climbs down, approaches them, and asks Blake why he's there. Blake introduces himself, and the man turns out to be Derek, the son of Grady's friend Dan. Derek explains that the usual route to Grady's is blocked but offers to guide them. Charlotte hesitates to let Derek into their truck, but he opens the door, causing her to step back. On the way, Derek warns them about the diseases and wildlife in the area, but Charlotte insists they're tough. Suddenly, Blake notices a man standing in the middle of the road. Swerving to avoid him, he loses control, leading to a terrible crash. Blake regains consciousness and confirms that everyone is safe. Derek opens his door and accidentally tumbles out of the truck. Meanwhile, Blake helps his family climb onto the roof for safety. After ensuring Charlotte and Ginger are secure, he spots a werewolf-like creature approaching and quickly locks the door. However, the beast still manages to wound him before turning its attention to Derek and dragging him away. Blake climbs out of the truck and leads his family forward. Eventually, they reach the farmhouse and hear approaching footsteps. The werewolf pursues them, but Blake protects his family and locks the creature outside. Once the thudding stops, Blake peers outside, grabs a flashlight, and heads to the basement. There, he finds the electric panel and switches on the generator. He then checks on Ginger, who insists on going home, but he gently puts her to sleep. Later, as he tries to step away, Ginger wakes up in fear. He comforts her and apologizes for bringing her into something so terrifying. He grows somber, mentioning that sometimes fathers become the very things that scar their children, but he refuses to let that happen to her, vowing to protect her. Blake then approaches Charlotte, who asks him about the werewolf, but he admits he knows nothing. Securing the door, he insists they need to contact someone for help. They retrieve Grady's CB radio, and Blake attempts to call for assistance, but it proves futile. Meanwhile, Charlotte rummages through random items and notices a set of keys but ignores them. Blake smells something odd, and upon opening a door, he discovers stored meat. He takes a bite and informs Charlotte about it, but suddenly, his tooth falls out. Alarmed, Charlotte rushes to help him and notices blood on his arm. On closer inspection, she realizes he's injured and bandages him while eyeing him suspiciously. Blake stays busy working as Charlotte and Ginger observe him, noticing subtle changes in his behavior. He urges them to get some rest and is securing the door when he accidentally hurts himself. Feeling parched, he gulps down large amounts of water. Suddenly, strange noises fill his ears, prompting him to investigate. Following the sound, he eventually spots a spider crawling inside a cupboard, hinting that he has been infected. His senses have sharpened dramatically, but he remains unaware of what's happening until he hears a werewolf howling in the forest. Panicked, he rushes to his family, warns Charlotte to stay silent, and listens carefully to the werewolf's approaching footsteps. As he peers outside, the creature suddenly grabs his leg. Blake struggles to break free, but Charlotte intervenes and rescues him. Overwhelmed, Blake panics and blacks out. After some time, he regains consciousness and tries to call for Charlotte but fails to form words. He hears her voice but cannot comprehend a single word. Following the sound, he finds her in the basement, desperately calling for help. Charlotte pleads for assistance, revealing that her husband has been infected and doesn't even realize it. She turns around and gasps in horror upon seeing Blake standing there, who, in his distress, loses control of himself. Charlotte lays him on the bed, and as Blake lies there, he notices his hair falling out. She brings a notebook and a pencil, asking him to write down what he's experiencing. With great effort, Blake barely scribbles the word, "dying." Devastated, Charlotte reads it and tearfully confesses her love for him, telling him they need him, but he can't comprehend a single word. Ginger joins them, and Charlotte reassures her that her father will be fine soon. Suddenly, she notices blood seeping from Blake's arm. As she inspects his wound, Ginger gets frightened and backs away. Charlotte removes the bandage, and Blake turns to the side, scratching at his injury. Eventually, he loses control and begins gnawing at his own flesh, terrifying Charlotte. Blake regains control, notices Charlotte's terrified expression, and silently walks away. Charlotte peeks outside and spots an old truck parked nearby. She rushes to the basement, locates its keys and battery, then grabs a knife before leading her family out. Ensuring their safety, they quickly make their way to the truck. After getting Blake and Ginger inside, Charlotte connects the battery and attempts to start the engine. The first few tries fail, but eventually, the truck roars to life. Meanwhile, Blake senses the werewolf nearby. Just as Charlotte prepares to drive away, the beast suddenly appears and attacks through the windshield. Its hand gets stuck, giving Charlotte and her family a chance to escape. She quickly leads them to the greenhouse roof for safety as the creature pursues them. They feel momentarily secure, but the werewolf breaks into the greenhouse and starts closing in. Ginger tries to reach her parents but slips, leaving her dangling. Charlotte barely manages to save her before the werewolf can grab her. Realizing they won't last much longer, Blake instructs Charlotte to take Ginger back to the house while he distracts the beast, allowing Charlotte and Ginger to escape safely. Back at the house, Ginger breaks down, accusing her mother of abandoning Blake to die. Charlotte comforts her, explaining that he was only trying to protect them. Moments later, panting sounds echo outside, and they find Blake standing at the door. Charlotte hesitates but lets him in, and he collapses from exhaustion. Ginger approaches and tries to speak to him. Tearfully, she confesses her love and begs for him to come back, but Blake suddenly vomits blood. Among the mess, he notices a severed werewolf finger and snaps. Overcome with rage, he lunges at Charlotte, only to stop abruptly, standing still as he stares at her. Realizing his mistake, Blake attempts to leave, but as he opens the door, the werewolf lunges at him. The creature overpowers Blake, wounding him severely, but before it can finish him off, Charlotte intervenes and stabs it in the back. As the werewolf retaliates, Charlotte quickly locks Ginger in a room while Blake launches another attack to protect her. The werewolf knocks Blake down and begins dragging him away when Ginger's scream suddenly diverts its attention. Seizing the moment, Charlotte distracts the beast, but just as it prepares to kill her, Blake strikes again. This time, he summons all his strength and tears its throat apart. As the werewolf collapses lifelessly, Blake notices a tattoo on its fist, realizing, to his horror, that it was his father. Stunned and devastated, he staggers out of the house, succumbing to his own transformation. Fully turning into a werewolf, Blake gazes at the forest and hears distant howls from others of his kind. Meanwhile, Charlotte stares at Grady's lifeless body as Ginger asks why her father had to change. Holding her close, Charlotte explains that long ago, Blake's father ventured into the forest and became infected. Now, he has passed the curse on to Blake. Just then, a noise startles Charlotte. She turns to see Blake, now fully transformed, staring at her. Fear grips her as he suddenly vanishes into the darkness, hinting that he is coming for them. Charlotte cautiously moves around and picks up a knife. Meanwhile, Blake sneaks in and silently stands behind Ginger. Charlotte panics when she sees him so close, and as Blake tries to reassure her, Ginger becomes terrified. In a panic, Charlotte lunges at him with the knife. Blake defends himself, but Charlotte and Ginger manage to escape, seeking refuge inside the barn. Inside, Charlotte spots a bear trap and quickly sets it up. Moments later, Blake arrives, while Charlotte and Ginger anxiously wait for him. Unbeknownst to them, Blake can see them clearly through the darkness. As he cautiously approaches, his foot suddenly gets caught in the trap. Charlotte and Ginger seize the opportunity, fleeing the barn and running into the forest. Blake yells for them to stop, but he is trapped. With no other choice, he bites off his own leg to free himself, and drags himself out of the barn. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Ginger navigate the forest with Blake trailing behind them. Charlotte stumbles upon Derek's remains and soon spots his gun. Handing the flashlight to Ginger, they see Blake watching them from atop their truck. Charlotte quickly leads Ginger to a deer blind, where they take cover. Moments later, Blake arrives, while Charlotte waits, gripping the gun. Blake finally steps into view, but Charlotte hesitates, unable to pull the trigger. He gazes at Ginger with sorrow, and she tells her mother that he wants it to end. Still, Charlotte cannot bring herself to shoot. Sensing her hesitation, Blake pretends to enter the deer blind, triggering Charlotte's instincts. Without thinking, she fires. Blake collapses, struggling to take his last breath. Overcome with grief, Ginger kneels beside him, placing her hand on his head as he peacefully fades away. Tears stream down her face, and Charlotte embraces her, whispering that she will always be there for her. The movie ends.